When an inquirer about Zen came to a master, often, they approach a Zen master with a kind of key question. What is the fundamental principle of Buddhism? Or why did the bearded barbarian come from the West? Because Zen is supposed to have been brought into China by a Hindu named Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is always represented as having a huge bushy beard and very fierce eyes. Now, Bodhidharma always insisted that he had nothing to teach. And so, why did he come? That's one of the fundamental questions. You might say to me, I've often said, I'm not trying to prove you.
I choose to think positively.
I'm not trying to
no matter what's going on around me.
To a certain point of view.
I have a great
That is to say, like me.
continue to have a great life.
In fact, I have nothing to tell you at all.
I inhale.
Because were I to assume that I had something to tell you, I would be like a person who picked your pocket and sold you your own watch. So you might say, then why do I talk? You might ask the sky, why are you blue? The clouds, why do you float around? Birds, why do you sing? And we've been busy trying to invent explanations for all this. So there's this great Zen saying, one of the old masters said, when I was a young man and knew nothing of Buddhism, mountains were mountains and waters were waters. When I began to understand a little Buddhism, mountains were no longer mountains, waters no longer waters. In other words, when one starts scientific and philosophical inquiries, everything gets explained away in terms of its causes, or other things that go with it. Or one sees that all the things in the world, what we think are separate things, are, as things, illusions. There is nothing separate. So, but he said in the end, but when I had thoroughly understood, mountains were mountains, and waters were waters. So, this is what's called direct pointing. A Zen master was once talking with me, and he said, when water goes out of the wash basin on the drawer, does it go clockwise or anti-clockwise? And this was all phrased in the middle of a very ordinary conversation. And, it just seemed like a speculative question. And I said, it might go either. He said, no, it's like this. Now, he said, which came the first, dog or hen? I said, duck, 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 hen! Now, he said, that's the point. Now, it is saying too much, I warn you, to say that Zen is trying to point to the physical universe so that you can look at it without forming ideas about it. That is saying too much, but it is the general idea. It's in the direction of being the right idea. Zen people speak of the virtue of what they call mushin, which means no mind, munen, no thought. That red Latin says munen, no thought. This is not an anti-intellectual attitude. The ordinary simple person is just as bamboozled by thinking as a university professor. You can think intellectually in a no-think way. That's the art. It doesn't mean not to have any thoughts at all. It means not to be fooled by thoughts, not to be hypnotized by the forms of speech and images that we have for the world, and not to be hypnotized by them into thinking that that is the way the world really is. So if I say this is a fan, it isn't. To begin with, fan is a noise. And this doesn't make the noise fan. It's a whoosh. But it can be many other things in the fan. All sorts of things. Don't let words. Actually, this fan has an inscription on it, written by a Zen master who is 100 years old. And it says, I don't understand, I don't know anything about it. So that goes back to the story of Bodhidharma, that when he first came to China, sometime before 500 AD, he was interviewed by the Emperor Wu of Liang. The emperor was a great patron of Buddhism and said, we have caused many monasteries to be built, monks and nuns to be ordained, and the scriptures to be translated into Chinese. What is the merit of this? Bodhidharma said, no merit whatever. Well, that really set the emperor down, because the popular understanding of Buddhism is that you do things like that, religious things, and you acquire merit. This leads you to better lives in the future, so that you will eventually become liberated. So he was completely said once, and he said, well, what is the first principle of the holy doctrine? And Bodhidharma said, vast emptiness and nothing holy. And in these emptiness there is nothing holy. So the emperor said, who is it then that stands before us? The implication being I am supposed to be holy. And Bodhidharma said, I don't know. So the poem says, plucking flowers to which the butterflies come. Bodhidharma says, I don't know. And another poem like it. If you want to know where the flowers come from, the god of spring doesn't know. So anybody who says that he knows what Zen is a fool. Nobody knows. Just like you don't know who you are. All this business about your name, your ambitions, your certificates, what your friends say about you. You know very well that's it. But the problem to know who you are is the problem of smelling your own nose. When the great Japanese master Dogen came back from China in about the year 1200 to bring his research to Japan, they asked him, what did you learn in China? He said, the eyes are horizontal, the nose is perpendicular. This man went on to write a tremendous book about Zen. They're so contradictory, these people. Don't expect consistency out of a Zen master. Big book, called the Shobogenzo. I talked with the Zen master about this book in Japan. And he said, oh, he said, that's a terrible book. It explains everything so clearly. It gives the show away. He said, you don't need any book for Zen. So you see, it is this kind of way of going about things, this method of Zen, that has so fascinated the West. And everybody who reads about Zen wonders if somehow, you see, this understanding is right under your nose. You know how it is sometimes you get a crowd of people who come into a room, and you put something in the room that's absurd. Like suppose there was a balloon floating on the sea. People could come in, I've never seen a balloon. know, somebody puts on something weird, some kind of a funny necktie or something. And you say to a person, well, have you noticed? Oh, what's in a new dress? You know? Haven't you noticed? I said, well, what is it? No, it's right under your nose. They're staring you in the face, but you don't see it. And then it's exactly like that. It is very obvious. The master Bokuju was asked, we have to dress and eat every day, and how do we escape from all that? In other words, how do we get out of routine? And he said, we dress, we eat.
Clap your hands if you believe.
He said, I don't understand. Bokuju said, if you don't understand, put on your clothes and eat your food. Another Zen master, quite recent times, was interviewing yesterday. All these boys are connected. It was grasped intuitively the connection. Was interviewing a student. And he said, get up and walk across the room. Got up and walked and came back. He said, where are your footprints? What is the way? Down. Down. He said, your everyday mind is the way. How do you get into accord with it? He said, when you try to accord, you deviate. So, here is this extraordinary phenomenon. Now let me say, having presented you with all these fireworks, let me say a few sober things about Zen as a historical phenomenon. Zen is a subdivision of Mahayana Buddhism. And as you know, that is the school of Buddhism which is concerned with realizing Buddha nature in this world. Not necessarily by going off to the mountains or by renouncing family life, everyday life, etc., etc., as if that were entanglement, but realizing in the midst of life the possibility of becoming a Buddha. And so the great ideal personality of Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva, the word now applied to somebody who has attained nirvana, but instead of disappearing, comes back in many, many guises. The famous painting of one of the bodhisattvas in the form of a prostitute. And bodhisattvas in Zen art are often represented as bums. There's the beautiful one over there, painted by Sengai, of the bum Hote, or Putai in Chinese, who's always immensely fat. And he's saying, Buddha is dead. Maitreya, who is supposed to be the next Buddha, hasn't come yet. I had a wonderful sleep and didn't even dream about Confucius. And he's just stretching and yawning as he wakes up. So, Zen is Mahayana, Indian Mahayana Buddhism, translated into Chinese, and therefore deeply influenced by Taoism and Confucianism. Zen monks brought Confucian ideas to Japan. And the origins of Zen lie, actually, around the year 414, at which time a great Hindu scholar by the name of Kumarajiva was translating with a group of assistants the Buddhist sutras into Chinese. One of his students taught that all beings whatsoever have the capacity to become Buddha, to become enlightened. Even rocks and stones. And that even heretics and evil doers have the Buddha nature or Buddha potentiality in them. and everybody said he was a dreadful character. Then a text called the Sutra came from India, which said precisely that. So everybody had to admit that this man was right. He also began to teach that awakening would be instantaneous. It's a kind of all or nothing state. I don't mean that there aren't degrees of intensity, but once you see the principle, you see the whole thing. As they say, when the bottom falls out of the bucket, all the water goes together. Those men then promulgated the way of sudden awakening. Bodhidharma came later, and he is supposed in legend to have been followed by a line of 6 patriarchs, of which he was the first. The second was named Eka, I'm using the Japanese pronunciation, who was formerly a general of the army. Then the third was Sosan, who wrote the summary of Buddhism. And so on till they came to Eno, 6th patriarch. You know perhaps more familiarly his Chinese name, Huineng. He died in 715 AD. He's the real founder of Chinese Zen, the man who synthesized the whole thing, and was the, at least his collected discourses are contained in what is called the Platform Sutra. And any student of Zen should read the Platform Sutra. But Eno really fused Zen with the Chinese way of doing things. And he emphasized very thoroughly, do not think you are going to attain Buddhahood by sitting down all day and keeping your mind blank. Because a lot of those students practice dhyana, which is the Sanskrit for Chan, which is the Chinese for Zen, which is the Japanese, means meditation, or contemplation, perhaps, translation in English. And everybody thought that the proper way to contemplate was to be as still as possible. But according to Zen, that is to be a stone Buddha instead of a living Buddha. Now I can knock a stone Buddha on the head, clunk, it has no feelings. And so it's a stone Buddha. There was a famous Zen master called Tankar, who went to a little lonely temple on a freezing cold night. And he took the Buddha image, one of the Buddha images off the altar, split it up and made a fire. And when the attendant of the temple came in the morning, he was horrified. Broke at the image, and Tankar took his stick, started raking in the ashes. And the temple priest said, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for the sali, that is to say the jewels that are supposed to be found in the body of a dead Buddha when he's cremated." So the priest said, "You couldn't expect to find sali from a wooden Buddha." In that case, said Tankar, "Let me have that other Buddha for my fire." That's the difference between living Buddha and stone. But a person who thinks that in order to be awakened, you have to be heartless, to have no emotions, no feelings, that you couldn't possibly lose your temper or get angry or feel annoyed or depressed. Those people haven't got the right idea at all. If that's your ideal, say, you might just as well be a block of wood or a piece of stone. What he wanted you to understand is that your real mind, while all those emotions are going on, is imperturbable. Just like when you move your hand through the sky, you don't leave a track. The birds don't stain the blue when they pass by. And when the water reflects the image of the geese, the reflection doesn't stick there. To be pure-minded in the Zen way, or clear-minded is a better way of translating, is not to have no thoughts. It's not a question of not thinking about dirty things. great the Tang Dynasty, when asked what was Buddha, believe it or not, answered, a dried turd. So it's not that kind of purity. It is purity, clarity, in the sense that your mind isn't sticky. You don't harbor grievances. You don't be attached to the past. You go with it, with life. Life is flowing all the time. That is the Tao, the flow of life. You are going along with it whether you want to or not. You're like people in a stream. You can swim against the stream, but you'll still be moved along by it. All you do is wear yourself out a little bit. But if you swim with the stream, the whole strength of the stream is yours. Of course, the difficulty that so many of us have is finding out which way the stream is going. But certainly, as it goes, all the past vanishes, the future does not yet arrive. And there is only one place to be. Here. And there is no way of being anywhere else. If you understand that thoroughly, your task is finished. You then become instantaneous and also momentous. So this was in principle. As I said, he died in 715, and he left 5 very great disciples who taught substantially the same sort of thing. But as things go, then these disciples had disciples, and those disciples had disciples, and there's a genealogy. And Zen broke into what are called 5 houses. And these, some of them didn't go on. Zen went on in 2 main forms. One is called, by the Japanese, Rinzai Zen, after the great master Rinzai, who lived towards the end of the 9th century. And the Soto school comes from another line, and they have a slightly different emphasis. Soto is more serene, Rinzai more gutsy. Rinzai people use the koan method in Zen studies, Soto people don't, at least not in the same way. But period between the death of the 5th patriarch and is the golden age. These were the really formative years. And after that, Zen began to decline in China. It became mixed up with other forms of Buddhism. And it suffered the fate of many, many forms of meditation type or yoga type discipline. It got a little bit sidetracked into occult and psychic matters. What are called in Buddhism siddhi, or the development of supernormal powers. For Zen, this is completely beside the point. But it got involved with Chinese alchemy, with Taoistic alchemy, and all sorts of foolishness in that direction. But a very strong strain of Zen went to Japan. The first being about 1130, Eisai, then about 1200, the monk I told you about, who founded the great, beautiful, gorgeous, voluptuous monastery at Heiji. Now, in this golden age of Chinese Zen, the main method of study was walking. All monks were great travelers. They walked from miles and miles through fields and mountains, visiting temples, to see if they could find a master who would cause their spark to flash. To get what is called in Mandarin Wu, or in Japanese Satori, or in Cantonese